Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Wallace with Wild Wallace Photography, and I am a naturalist and nature photographer specializing in reptiles and amphibians from the Pacific Northwest. Today I'll be talking to you about how to properly add color, saturation, and vibrance to your reptile and amphibian and other wildlife photos. Getting the color, saturation, and proper vividness to your subject animal is essential to making your photograph magic. Unfortunately, we have all seen those viral photos where the saturation and vibrance has been cranked all the way up to 100 and the image and photograph just looks radioactive and unnatural. Luckily, in Lightroom, there are some incredible, powerful tools to bring the colors present in nature to life and make them pop, thus making your subject animal pop and be its magnificent, beautiful, incredible self. So let's jump right on in and take a look at these tools in Lightroom. Alrighty, so here's a picture of a beautiful red striped Northwestern Gartersnake. I chose this image because of the beautiful red-orange stripe on the snake, combined with the green moss and some of the subtle blues and aquas on the mouth and side stripes of the snake really play well to looking at the different colors and choices we have. So the main two sliders in Lightroom that people will use are the Vibrance and Saturation slider. And what saturation does is saturation adds or detracts intensity to every color in the image at an equal rate across the entire photograph and the entire tonal range. And as I bring the saturation up, you can see all of the colors becoming more intense, popping. I can also take the saturation away, and you can see how the colors get more diluted, more faded, and the color leaves the image almost entirely. So that is what saturation does. It's a global adjustment that affects everything. Vibrance is a little bit smarter of an editing tool. With adding color, what Vibrance does is it attacks more of the midtones and desaturated parts of your image. It also attacks more of the greens and the blues, and it is really designed to preserve skin tones in a lot of portrait photography. And as you can see, when I bring the Vibrance slider up, the greens and the blues start getting more intense, and the red slowly starts to come online. But when I'm up here and I'm going this high for dramatic effect, so you can see how deep these greens have gotten in the blue here in the face of the snake. I'm going to bring this back down to 0 and bring the saturation up to a similar number, and you can see with saturation how much brighter and more saturated and deeper that red coloration has got in line with the green on the moss. So saturation and vibrance are those two main tools that people will use in Lightroom to bring in the color. And people have heard, don't crank that saturation slider up, don't crank that vibrance slider up too high. So what most people will do is they'll upload their photograph, they'll make some of their basic edits, and they'll take saturation and they'll go somewhere around 20, and they'll do the same for vibrance, and they'll call it a day. And they'll say, perfect, that's it. I added the color to the scene and made the raw file not so flat and made it pop, and let's go. And they'll post that up. But there's a better way. And even with this, these greens have become way too saturated and look unnatural, even though the snake is okay. It did a decent job on the snake, but these greens just totally dominate and overpower the photograph. So I'm going to bring these back down to 0, and we're going to go down into the next panel here, and a panel in Lightroom that is incredibly powerful, and that is the color mixer. So in the color mixer, you have your HSL, which stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. And you can organize this in two ways. You can have your hue, each of your individual hues, each of your individual saturations, each of your individual luminance values. You can also set this up by each color, hue, saturation, and luminance from each color. And this is a much more targeted adjustment because I can attack just the individual colors that I wish to adjust. And so on this photograph here, let me go over to the orange. And if I take this hue slider, it'll adjust, it'll make the orange pixels more red, or if I slide it to the right, more yellow. And from this, I can adjust the color of the stripe to match what the snake looked like in real life. And in this particular individual, the stripe was definitely more red than orange. So I'm gonna just slide that hue slider just slightly over to the red side of things. And I'm gonna boost the saturation up on the orange values. And I'm gonna kind of overcook this so you can see, as I boost the orange saturation up, the greens and the blues have not become saturated, and this orange stripe has become saturated. So I can put that to a level that I think works really great, which that screams perfect to me. And I can go over here to the red slider and do the same thing, show you on the hue. So I can change the hue of this red to more orange, or over to more magenta, although it was perfect with the adjustment on the orange slider. And I can boost the saturation of this red up, and as you can see, as I go up, the red becomes more and more boosted. So I'm going to put the red kind of about there, and then luminance controls how bright these color values are. But generally, I kind of leave the luminance where it is, unless I absolutely need it to help control some highlights in some colors. Now I can also go on over here to the greens. So with these greens, I can, again with the hue, I can change the color tone of the greens. I can make them more yellow or more blue. And I think I actually kind of like my moss a little bit bluer. I can take the saturation as well and lower the saturation of the moss, which has a double impact of making the colors that I put onto the snake pop even more, while not jacking them up all the way. Just as a point of comparison to the moss, it will appear more saturated while keeping that realistic tone. I'm also funneling the color to the part of the photograph I want the viewer's eyes to be at. So that is in the HSL slider, and I can do that with each individual color. Like I said, I can bring up the blues or the aquas, because there's some subtle blues here in the lips of the snake and the side stripes. Let me go over here to the aqua, and you can see as I bring that saturation up, it goes. But honestly, I think it looks fine just where it is. So that is the HSL panel, and that's how you control the hue of each color, the saturation of each color, and the luminance of each color. And in that panel, you can get dialed in very detailed on which individual colors you're going to highlight, which individual colors you're going to less emphasize. So what I'm going to do now to highlight the next fantastic tool, which was a recent addition to Lightroom, I think it's within the last year or so, and that is the point color. And more importantly, an aspect of point color that you can use in the masking tools in Lightroom. So far everything we've talked about has been fairly global to the entire photograph. And in the masking tool, I can dial the point color down to just specific parts of the photo. Reset all these over to 0, so we're back at ground 0, and I can go into the point color. So point color is such a groundbreaking tool. Unfortunately, with how the masking was prior in Lightroom, I would actually have to do a lot of my color edits in Photoshop. Although with the point color now, I can do a lot of them back in Lightroom, which is a simpler and easier product to use, for sure. So what you do is you take this eyedropper here to sample a point color, And I'm going to bring it right to the stripe of the snake and let go. So hold, drag to the color you want, and drop it right there. I can also, you can see as I highlight over, it'll show the different colors that I'm sampling. And then on this big color swatch that goes from not very saturated to fully saturated and across the spectrum of colors. So I'm going to find a spot that hits perfect on what the tonal range of that is. Right there sounds good. Perfect. And as you can see here, we have our circle where we've selected the color, and it's right here on this orange. It's slightly biased towards the red side of the orange. And down here I can go to a hue shift and adjust the hue from red to more yellow. As you can see, the open circle is where I'm adjusting to, and the smaller circle with the black dot is where I started at. So I'm going to make this slightly redder, kind of like how we did in the HSL panel. And I can bring the saturation up. And because I'm just targeting the exact color that is that stripe instead of the entire orange range, or the entire red range, or the entire yellow range, I can actually be less heavy-handed as I bring the saturation up because it's just targeting that particular color. Fantastic. So that looks pretty great right there. Actually might not need to move it so much. Right there seems perfect. Raise that up just a touch more. Beautiful. And perfect. So to show even more dramatically, if I hit this visualize range, it'll turn everything black and white except for the colors that I am adjusting from the point color. And as you see in this picture, it is target even more directly to that color that I chose, or I can have a wider reach in that color. But honestly, Lightroom usually does a pretty good job, and I just kind of leave it right there at 50 generally. Alrighty, so I'm going to unclick visual range here, and I'm going to take my dropper, and I'm going to go over to a piece of the moss, and select the moss, and it's right here in this green range. And like I said, I kind of like it slightly bluer, and I'm going to bring the saturation down on that moss. Same thing again, I can click visualize range, and these are all of the colors that are being desaturated now. So all this moss, and it's targeting just that moss. I'm going to bring that down. I'm going to unclick there. And I'm going to go back to the orange to highlight the problem and the amazingness of the point color and how we can use the point color to just target where we want to go. So I'm going to hit this visualize range again, and you can see, well, yes, the stripe is all highlighted. Fantastic, exactly what we wanted. There's still some orange up here, and some orange in these sticks and pine needles that are on the ground, and I don't want to add any saturation to those parts of the photograph. So I'm going to undo the visualize spots here real quick, undo the visualize range here real quick, and I'm going to crank the saturation up all the way so you can really see how these sticks here and up here have become unfortunately saturated as well. Go right on back to where we were, and I'm actually going to delete this color swatch. Right click on the swatch, delete swatch, bam. And what I'm going to do is go up to this dash circle, and that is the masking panel, and I'm going to click masking, and I'm going to hit select subject. So with the subject selected, Lightroom does a very good job of determining what is the subject in the photograph. Perfect. So, and it is selected with a red mask over the entire snake. And generally Lightroom does a good job, but you can use the add to mask or subtract from mask and brush to brush in any areas that were missed, like this area here. And then I'll do a subtract from mask brush over here for a part that shouldn't have been really selected up. Perfect. And for the purpose of this, I don't need to get it exact. But we can see I can adjust that mask. And now, when I go into these edits, I can adjust the exposure of just the snake, which is great. So I can make the snake pop quite a bit. I can do a bunch of different adjustments to the snake that I would like. So that's where masking comes into play. So for when it comes to adding or subtracting color, how it used to be in masking is you could just use this saturation adjustment over the mask and it would work just like the saturation slider on the main global side of things, although targeted just the areas you selected. As you can see, as I bring the saturation up, it is saturating the snake without saturating the background, which is great, that's what we want, but it's still doing the full adjustment across the entire range, which we don't want in this particular case because it is making these blues look quite unnatural on the snake. So what I'll do, if you go down, you get the point color selection like we just went through, and I can highlight over a spot on the stripe. I can make my adjustments that I was wanting to make on these and bring them up and saturate that stripe up. Fantastic. And in doing so, none of these other orangey spots were saturated. I'm going to show you for effect. I'm going to go bring it down. See how the background's staying colored. If I bring the colors all the way up, there's no adjustment to the back. There's no adjustment to any of the colors in the background. It is just here on the stripe. Bring that back to neutral. Pump that saturation up to where I thought looked perfect, which is right there. Great. Fantastic. Alrighty. So that was an overview of the various tools that we have at our disposal in Lightroom to properly add the color, saturation, and vibrance to our reptile and amphibian and other wildlife photographs in a way that is natural and makes the animal shine while avoiding turning our photo into a radioactive disaster. Put these tools to use, and I cannot wait to see the amazing photographs that y'all create. Here's the final image of that garter snake, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again.